We can hear each other.
Yay!
Isn't that
Well,
exciting?
she can't hear you. Well, she can maybe sort of hear you through my headphones, but
Hopefully not too much, because
no.
that would make you the annoying roommate.
Yeah. She didn't laugh, so she probably didn't hear that well.
Okay, excellent.
If you can hear her through my headphones, then that makes me the annoying roommate.
Okay, so she was going to laugh at the joke, so
yeah,
she probably didn't hear it.
See, yeah. So we're probably good.
Science!
But I can't hear what she's saying.
She said she can hear your voice, but she can't make out anything that you're saying.
So you're only the semi-annoying roommate.
Right. And like I pay for like all of the apartments, so she lets me, make some allowances for that.
Okay, that's legit. As long as you guys have a plan, that's the important part.
Right, exactly.
All right, so chapter 24, 25.
24 and 25. And I wanted to read 26, but like it was like 15 minutes till, and Kindle was telling me it was 15 minutes, and I'm a slow reader, so it was probably more like 20 minutes.
Kindle's supposed to adjust based on your reading speed.
That's a little bit frightening, because like sometimes I'll be like sitting on one page forever because like I'll get distracted by something else around me, and I'll look at it and I'll be like standing on the same page for like 10 minutes.
Well, so Kindle thinks you're a really slow reader.
Right.
But it tells me that chapter 26 is 4 minutes long.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, so it's probably at least somewhat relevant.
A little bit. Also, if you don't just sit on one page for 10 minutes, it goes faster.
Right?
Pro tip.
Huh. I'll have to give that a try sometime. Because 25 looks like it rolls directly into 26, and like it seems terribly relevant to the story.
It really does, but
and there's not a whole lot in 25 that makes. I think it's all just set up for 26. It seems.
Kind of. What to do? I mean, so the theme of chapters, the summary of chapter 24 and 25 is Bingley's a jerk, or if he's not actively a jerk, he's like passively a jerk, because his friends are like, you should be a jerk, and he's like, yeah, I totally should.
Right.
So that happened.
Yeah.
And Mr. Bennet was not very serious on the matter.
No.
He recommends to Elizabeth that she should find somebody who can jilt her.
Yes.
I mean, it would be a shame for Jane to be the only one with her heart broken.
Yeah.
And suggest Mr. Wickham as a possible option for that.
Yes.
And then their aunt shows up, and they talk about the fact that Bingley's a jerk.
Indeed.
Pretty much it.
Yeah. Well,
and
they
Mrs.
talk about
Bennet is like, oh my God, everything is terrible. Everything is awful. Like, Jane's not engaged, and Lizzie's not engaged, and Charlotte is engaged. This is like the worst possible outcome in the entire world, but at least you're here to tell me about the long sleeves that are fashionable in London, and that really helps.
Well, she's going on her tirade to her sister. She's like, and to have neighbors who think of themselves before anybody else is like one of the worst possible things. And I'm like, Mrs. Bennet. Oh, Mrs. Bennet. Oh, Mrs. Bennet, Mrs. Bennet. Oh, my gosh. Oh, man. Where do I start? It is a truth universally known that a man in possession of great fortune. Let's start there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I highlighted that one because I'm like, wow, nice.
Yeah.
To be thwarted so in my own family.
Right? Like her family is working against her happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Actively. I
right.
mean, Well,
like Elizabeth didn't decide not to marry um
Mr.
the
Collins.
Mr. Collins. Like she didn't decide not to marry him because, you know, she wouldn't be happy with Mr. Collins. She decided not to marry him because screw her mom, right?
Right. Well, and to be fair, Mrs. Bennet believes that Lizzie's job is to make her happy.
That's
And
true.
screw Lizzie's happiness.
Right, yeah. That's so I mean it's a little bit of a, you know, tit for tat, like
Right.
when you live in a
I think
world
Lizzie
where
is in fact very patient with her mother about all of this.
I in chapter 25 I totally highlighted like one of the first things that they said there. Mr. Gardner, who is Mrs. Bennet's brother, Mr. Gardner was a sensible, gentlemanlike man, greatly superior to his sister as well by nature as education.
Yes. Which kind of tells you everything you need to know. I highlighted the one right after that. The Netherfield ladies would have had difficulty in believing that a man who lived by trade within view of his own warehouses could be so well bred and agreeable. Which is just, I mean, it's an interesting.
Yeah, he acts like a noble person.
He
Basically
acts,
is what
yeah,
they're saying,
he
right?
acts like a person.
Yeah, like he acts like a GD human being.
Right? Because very early on, I don't know if I can find it. They referenced that. They referenced Mr. Gardner. With such a father and mother and such low connections, I am afraid there is no chance of Jane being well settled. And somebody said, think I have heard you say their uncle is an attorney in Meryton. Yes, and they have another who lives somewhere near Cheapside.
Okay.
That is capital, added her sister, and they both laughed heartily. If they had uncles enough to fill all of Cheapside, cried Bingley, it would not make them one jot less agreeable.
Right.
But it must very materially lessen their chance of marrying men of any consideration in the world. His sisters gave it their hearty assent and indulged their mirth for some time at the expense of their dear friend's vulgar relations. So I'm pretty sure that that they're like really part of the reason for breaking up Jane and Bingley is that this uncle, whom they've never met, and if they met, they would be like, "Oh, isn't he remarkably well bred and awesome?"
Yeah.
They're like, yeah. For that reason, you guys have to break up. You're broken up now. Just FYI.
Yeah. Oh, right, Netherfield. See, when I read that as
you have to keep track.
I know it's so. Right. That's one of the hardest things about this is that we don't live in a world where we talk about people according to their home.
We totally should give we should all give our homes names.
when my brother and I lived up in Boulder, we did. It was the Moose House.
It was the Moose House. I remember that.
Because when we got it, there were a bunch of moose sculptures and stuff lying around.
Just everywhere.
Everywhere.
Even when we started having NNO there were a bunch of moose.
Yeah, we'd gotten rid of like half the moose in the house. And like we'd kept a bunch of the other ones. Because we were like, we're gonna call this the Moose House. So we decided to keep some of the moose around.
You gotta keep some of the moose.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have nerds coming over tonight. We'll figure out what we're gonna call this house.
Nice.
And I'll let you know.
Okay.
You and Erin have to come up with a name for your apartment.
For our apartment, we have to come up with a name for our apartment. But not right now. We can think about it. Nice.
You have a week.
We have a week. Yeah.
Is she giving you the sure Scott whatever look?
Kind of. Well, she's ignored. She smiled and then went back to what she was doing. So that's
which is probably the best possible response.
that is one of the best possible responses I could get from this. So.
Yeah. All right. Chapter 20. What else did I highlight?
So there's I highlighted a lot of insights in chapter 24, like interesting things about like the human condition and stuff. Um,
Uh-huh.
like the Elizabeth listening said, like whether he, talking about Mr. Bingley, whether he had been aware of Jane's attachment or whether it had escaped his observation, whatever were the case, though her opinion of him must be materially affected by the difference, her sister's situation remained the same, her peace equally wounded. And I'm like,
Yes.
that's really, really important, because a lot of people are like, like something goes wrong, they're like, no, I have to like find the person responsible and punish them. And it's like, yeah, but like regardless of what you think of the situation, the person who was wounded is still like, it doesn't really matter what the reasoning was, like the offense still happened. Like,
right. Well, and a lot of people are like, well, I didn't mean to hurt you, therefore I am not at fault.
right.
And it's like, no, the wound still happened. It's still here.
Right. And maybe you're not at fault. Maybe they don't hate you after you explained like why, how you didn't mean to do it, but it still happened. They're still injured. And so you still need to tend to their injury. Like,
yes. And you can be like, hey, I forgive you, but I still hurt.
right.
Like,
I had,
that doesn't change that fact.
I have a friend who, subscribes very heavily to, what did she call it? I don't remember what it is. It's like like a Norse mythology, like a Viking kind of religiosity in terms of like forgiveness and stuff. Where like, and like there's this whole big website that she linked to on Facebook one time, and I read it and it was very interesting. But basically it was like, the Viking does not forgive because you can't go back to where the way things were. Like you can never go back to the way things were. And so it takes this assumption, which I think is a fairly accurate Western assumption of forgiveness. And like the assumption that like once something is forgiven, it's forgotten. Which is never, it's not possible. Like, anything that's major that really
and
needs to be
therefore,
forgiven.
if you still remember it, you're not forgiving it.
Right.
When we were in, so I'm reading Forgive for Good by Luskin, Dr. Luskin, because in Ireland we met a guy who's a forgiveness coach.
Nice.
And he said if there was one phrase he could eliminate from the English language, it would be forgive and forget, because they're unrelated. That's not what it means. That's not what forgiveness means. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean you weren't hurt by it. It doesn't mean you don't remember it. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to be like cautious about this person in the future. Right? You can be like if your 2-year-old, your 5-year-old spills Kool-Aid on the carpet, they can be really sorry and you can forgive them. Doesn't mean you're going to let them have Kool-Aid in the living room.
Right.
Like,
yeah, if
there's a difference,
you'd make the same mistake over and over again.
Right? That doesn't make any sense. You forgive, and then you make intelligent decisions about how to proceed in the future.
Right.
They're different things.
Yeah. I've been thinking about like, in terms of like, Christian belief and stuff and forgiveness or whatever, that like what I think is my working kind of personal definition of forgiveness is that like in every situation where someone was offended, there's like, it's like they took something from you. They took, your clean carpet, or they took your sense of trust or whatever. They took that from you. And so there is kind of like a debt that is owed because of what they took from you. And in my sense, in my working view of forgiveness at this point in my life, forgiveness is acknowledging that you do not want that debt repaid. You do not request that debt be repaid anymore.
Right. That was basically, so I subscribed to Best Advent Ever through this link that Marion sent, and he sent like a thing to think about for every day of Advent leading up to Christmas. And one of them was forgiveness. And that was exactly the process. Like, think about something you need to forgive and figure out exactly what would be required for them to make that up to you. Like, write it down, exactly what would have to happen. and then make a conscious decision to release that debt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a reason we use the same word if you negotiate with your student loan people and you're like, hey, they're like, hey, you owe $12,000. And you're like, hey, I could pay you $12,000 over time, or I can pay you $10,000 right now. What do you think? And they'll be like, yeah, we'll take that right now and forgive the other $2,000. There's a reason we use the same word.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, I think it's
So,
like the meaning is hidden somewhere in like, forgive, like you're giving something or like
right,
forgiving,
giving
like,
something up.
yeah. I don't feel like looking it up exactly right now, the etymology. But yeah,
I do.
I,
I always feel like looking up etymology.
I usually do too, but like I've got my Kindle open right here, and like usually I have like a web page on my browser on my phone that's just always a tab that's always open to Edym Online. But nice. I don't feel like switching apps, so.
Okay, so that's fascinating. From the Old English vergeven, which is to give or grant or allow, or remit a debt or pardon an offense, or also give up, which makes sense, or also to give in marriage. So you could like forgive your daughter.
Nice.
Do. From for, which means completely, and then give. So to give completely.
Okay.
They define the current meaning of the sense as to give up the desire or power to punish.
Nice. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And there's no like in the actual definitions, there's no sense of like acting as though the offense never happened.
Right. That's not what it means.
Yeah. And I think that's like I don't know, that's like a Western ideal that like just doesn't, I don't know where it came from, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's certainly not realistic.
Right. It doesn't work that way. Well, and I mean, I feel like it's a very like weird theologically, because in theory, God forgives your sins after some atonement or whatever process. And I don't think anyone thinks he forgets your sins. Like, that would screw with the whole omniscience thing. So I don't know. We have just such a screwed up.
I think it might come from some of the wordings surrounding the talking about like the religion of forgiveness, where they're like, he forgives your sins, and it is as though you are washed clean and they had never happened. But like,
okay,
I think that means like in terms of like judgment and like reward in heaven and stuff like that. I don't think that means like, you're no longer held accountable for the bad things you do if you go through whatever the repentance process, the religion is.
So I'm Googling forgive and forget, and the first thing I find is forgive and forget in the Bible? And the answer is no. Forgive is in the Bible. No one said anything about forget.
Right.
And then just like page after page of how to forgive and forget. Like they are so combined in our culture that like that. So then I'm like forgive and forget origin, and when I type forgive and forget OR, the second response that Google suggests is forgive and forget or forgive and never forget.
Nice. I love how Google
God
searches.
It gives you the most fascinating things.
Insight into people.
God said, I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more. Don Quixote said, let us forget and forgive injuries. And King Lear has forget and forgive.
Like, I mean, I think that there's probably a value to trying to forget things um that trying to forget them in order, like, I'm meaning like trying to work towards living in a way that um you don't take the offense into account whenever you interact with that person anymore.
Right. No, like thinking about it constantly, I think is what, like, stop brooding on it,
Right.
I think is what it's trying to say.
Right. To work
It's
towards
just
getting to the point where
badly.
like you don't just constantly remember it. You're just like, it's like, oh yeah, no, they did that one thing to me that one time, but like they're, you know,
Well, and when you're making future decisions, you say, is this a thing I need to take into account?
right.
Right.
Hmm.
But you're not, if nothing's coming up, if you're not actively engaged in interacting with this person or making a decision about this person, you're not sitting there in your, like, sitting on the couch, like thinking over everything this person did to hurt you.
Right. Your kid who spilled Kool-Aid on the white carpet, you're not just like going to bed being like that stupid little rugrat. I'm like putting like my carpet in the Kool-Aid. Like I'm never going to be able to trust him again. To
Right.
like never going to give him Kool-Aid again. Just water from here on out. Nothing.
Ever,
I don't
right?
want him to
This is
talk
not
to
a
me
useful
like.
thing,
Right. But at
right?
the same time, like you said, you don't want to just like be like, oh, okay, well, I forgive you. Here's another thing of Kool-Aid. Go sit on the carpet.
Right? That's a terrible plan.
Right. So if you're just like, yeah.
Because
Yeah,
I was
interesting.
also looking at Jane. Jane and Elizabeth are talking, and Elizabeth is like, no, he definitely liked you. Like, Bingley was definitely crushing on you. And Jane is like, if that is true, then everyone around me is a terrible person. And that is not the world I want to live in. So let
Right.
me live in a world where I was wrong. He wasn't as attracted to me as I was to him. That's fine. I can live with that. And my friends are actually friends. I want to live in that world.
Mm-hmm.
And Elizabeth's like, that's legit.
Yeah. The yeah, no, I highlighted a few of the things that Jane said. Um let's see. She said, I have this comfort immediately that it has not been more than an error of fancy on my side, and that it has done no harm to anyone but myself, which is a bit of a martyr kind of a mentality. But like she's glad that like this whole situation, nobody else got hurt other than her, because like she can handle it,
Right.
and nobody else is sucked into the quagmire of complicated emotional trauma.
Complicated.
Yeah.
That's definitely what this is.
Right.
And then Elizabeth is like, oh, you're really awesome. And Jane's like, no, I'm really not. You're just really nice. And Elizabeth's like, this is not fair. You wish to think all the world respectable and are hurt if I speak ill of anybody. I only want to think that you are perfect, and you set yourself against it.
Right. Yeah. That one was funny. And then Elizabeth's just having like a really hard time right now, because like
Yeah.
first she was proposed to by Collins, and then, which was awful, and then her best friend, first Mr. Bingley left, I think, and Jane, and then she
They
was
happened at
proposed to
about the
by,
same time
yeah, I don't
anyway.
remember which
Yeah.
one was specific, but like those two things happened, and then Charlotte comes in and decides, you know what, that Mr. Collins, I could marry him. That seems like a decent deal. I'll go for that.
Right.
And so she's having
and
like this.
I highlighted the one where where Jane says, maybe she really likes Mr. Collins. And Elizabeth's like, don't go there. If she likes Mr. Collins, then I can't like her anymore.
Yeah.
And what I highlighted was, you shall not, for the sake of one individual, change the meaning of principle and integrity.
Yeah.
Which I mean maybe is a little strong. I don't know if the principle of no one shall marry Mr. Collins is really a principle worth fighting for.
I think the principle of is that of no one like interesting or respectable should want to marry Mr. Collins.
But still, is that really where you're going to plant your flag and be like, here I shall fight to the death?
Yeah. Well, and
apparently yes.
And as Jane points out, she said, "You do not make allowance enough for difference of situation and temper." Like,
right.
Which is this, like, it's a huge thing. Like, it's so from the time that we're like 5 and able to distinguish that, you know, people who aren't us might have different experiences than us. We're still terrible at allowing for that to be a thing. Like,
there was a really great TED talk about that because we don't like to imagine the idea that we could be wrong. But the fact remains that people disagree with us.
Right.
And so we have to, so our first inclination is to say, they're stupid. And if they were intelligent, they would agree with us. But then maybe you talk to somebody who, you know, is on the other side of the gun debate or the other side of the abortion debate or whatever. And it turns out they're actually reasonably intelligent people. So then our second line of defense is they don't have the facts. Like if they knew what we knew, they would agree with us. And then you present those facts, right? You get into an online debate, you present your whatever, and they still disagree with you. And the problem is then that leads to our third fallback, which is they are evil.
Right.
They know they're intelligent and they know the facts, which means they must believe the same as we do, but they are knowingly leading the world astray due to some nefarious purpose.
Right.
And that is really not a place you want to go. Like, and that's not a useful way of looking at the world.
Yeah,
whereas if it's possible that you are wrong, then you have intelligent, reasonable people in possession of the same facts disagreeing with each other, and that's a thing that happens.
Well, and so here's
and
the thing
Elizabeth is a little too far in the like, hey, everybody has to see things the way I do, or they're stupid.
Right. Like, here's the thing. Like, every time I've run into like heavy, like heated debates or something on Facebook, what I've always tried to do, the ones that I've wanted to get involved in, which is fewer and fewer these days. The thing I've always tried to do is to like work both sides down to the point where like there's a simple, small disagreement of opinion, and that's all there is. All it is. It's
right.
All of these. Everybody can agree on all of these facts. Usually, you know, once you suss out all the facts, it's like okay, all these facts. We agree on all of these facts. All these big things that people are arguing about. We can, you know, like we generally have the same kinds of ideas about them, but the reason that we're on one side or the other is because of some very small thing right at the base where one person says, I believe that this is a valuable thing more than this is a valuable thing.
Right. It absolutely comes down to like, is it more important to be compassionate or that everybody who can contribute as much as they are capable of doing? Like,
right.
That's it. That's the entire welfare debate. Right there.
Yeah, it's
but
what's
because
more
we
important.
Disagree on which one is more important.
And
then you build up from there. The whole thing gets into
and
what it is.
The thing that's so frustrating is that everyone's arguing up here. Everyone's all back and forth about like little things over here that are founded on just this one small thing. Like you should just like literally the only thing that you should have to do is to be like, look, I am 60% this way and 40% this way. Therefore, I go along this side, this branch, because I think this is probably the better way to go. And the other person's like, well, I'm the opposite. I'm like, you know, 55% this way and 45% this way. And so I go along this branch, I guess.
Right. And that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But so one time when I was working at the game store, there was a kid that wanted these like toy handcuffs. And his mom was like, no, I'm like, I don't know exactly what was bugging her about it, but she really did not feel comfortable with the idea of her kid playing with handcuffs, whatever that was. So he says, I want the handcuffs. She says, no. He says, but they're not real. And she says, I know. And he says, so I can get them. And she's like, no. And he's like, but they're not real. And he follows her around the store for 15 minutes going, but mommy, they're not real. She's like, no, we're not getting them. But mommy, they're not real. And I'm like, kid, that's not her objection. Find the objection and then adjust your sales pitch. Like, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
But we make these assumptions about what people's objection is, and then are like, well, if I tell you this one thing, that destroys the entire argument, and you post it in Facebook, and you're like,
it's where all those obnoxious memes come from.
Ended, right? You're like, no, you really haven't actually.
Snarky sometimes ended. Photos with like comments or whatever, and I'm like, that's not the problem. That's not that's not the opposition's problem. In fact, that's not even what the opposition is arguing.
Right.
That's what you think they're saying, because setting up a straw man makes life easier than like actually understanding your opposition. But I can't go to 300 million people in America. Is that what the Powerball numbers were saying?
Yeah.
The bad Powerball math.
The bad Powerball math.
The 318 million people in America. I can't go to 318 million people and convince them and like teach them about the straw man fallacy.
But
okay,
you could like start. You could go door to door and be like, "Hi, do you have a moment to talk about the future of rhetorical debate in our country?" And
I have experience with this. I could do that.
Right? And if you converted even just one person to stop making straw man arguments on the internet, would it be worth it?
What would be better is if I could convince one person to know what straw man arguments were, so that they could then like spread the word to their friends. We'll have like,
I do want those. I don't know if you saw them, the little like American football referee flags that were like false argument.
Yes.
Or straw man, or like false dichotomy, or whatever that you can just like throw into debates.
Oh my gosh, I need to go find those again, because I wanted to
just
keep
like
those
save
around.
them to your computer.
Yeah.
And just every time you're reading something on Facebook, just be like,
hang on a second. Let's see. Referee. Logical fallacy referee is the meme name.
Nice. So this person argues that, I mean, back on like 3 subjects ago,
okay,
that this is more powerful and sweeter than forgetting. If I can remember the sin and yet still love that person, that is a miracle. That is this person's Christian. That is Christianity.
Yeah. Like there's a
ability to not forget and yet forgive.
Yeah. There's a quote, and I hesitate to bring up Orson Scott Card for anything other than writing good fiction, because like politically he's a bit of a nightmare to talk to people about, because they either agree with him or they think he's the devil incarnate. But something he said a long time ago, or is quoted as saying a very long time ago, is that if you understand completely a person and the circumstances of their life, you cannot help but love them.
So we can put that in. That was, I'm pretty sure, part of his fiction.
Yeah, I think it might have been from his fiction.
I think Ender was the speaker on that.
Yeah. So like that one line has stuck out to me like pretty much since I read it, as like, a part of my life where, like growing up or whatever, a teenager learning to drive and stuff, like, learning how to deal with road rage and stuff. Like
Right.
at some point I realized, like, no, that person did whatever they did, and there is a reason that they did that and that they thought it was okay. Either they didn't see me, or they feel personally like they're in such a hurry that they're willing to risk themselves and other people's lives, or they don't understand the risk to me and other people on the road when they did that. Like, I can't be angry at
Right.
them
Or
for
there is
doing
some
something.
reason they genuinely intended to piss you off. And there is some reason that they think that pissing you off will make their lives better.
Right. And that's kind of sad.
That's honestly, yeah, just as heartbreaking. Because I remember I was highlighting the thing where Jane was like, no, I don't want to believe that everyone around me is awful. I'd rather believe that Bingley didn't like me.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, in road rage situations, right? Somebody cuts you off in traffic. You're never going to see that person again. There is no benefit to forming an accurate understanding of that person in your mind. You can choose to believe that they're a total jerk who did it to piss you off, or you can choose to believe that their wife is in the front seat in labor right now. Like, either one is just as likely to be accurate. They're probably both wrong.
Right.
But I get to live in a world where I was the nice person who helped the guy trying to get his best friend to the hospital with alcohol poisoning get to the hospital faster. So why not, as opposed to being Mrs. Bennet and believing that everybody does everything to piss me off, how about I not do that?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a really good thing that leads me to later in the chapter. Something I'd highlighted is obviously, Lizzie and Jane are arguing, and Jane said, "It is very often nothing but our own vanity that deceives us. Women fancy admiration means more than it does." Elizabeth responds, "And men take care that they should."
Which, okay, I read that and I'm like, wow, sexist much?
Yeah.
I'm like, I really don't actually think men are actively out to, like, I guess there's some, the whole pickup artist culture.
Right. There's some
is out there. I'm not denying its existence, but
it's less than 1%.
To put that on the entire gender,
yeah,
seems a little embittered.
So, yeah, and so then Jane responds, "If it is designedly done, they cannot be justified. But I have no idea of there being so much design in the world as some persons imagine."
Yes.
And that's the line that I highlighted, because it's like, no, there's everyone, like, people are politically, emotionally, like, everyone's like, people are out to get me or whatever, and like Mrs. Bingley or Mrs. Bennet's all like, everyone's trying to make my life miserable. And it's like, no, you're talking about like Adam Smith's invisible hand here, and like the whole point of that is that it doesn't actually exist.
Right. Because I remember I ran across it in high school. I think it was, trying to remember, it was somebody's theory of Chinese relativity that basically says no matter how outstanding your accomplishments or how crushing your defeats, approximately 1 billion Chinese could not care less. And it's actually kind of comforting.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no matter, I failed sophomore English. You know what? There's 1 billion Chinese who don't give a damn.
Yeah. There's probably like 7 billion people in the world who just really don't care.
Well, I mean, to a first approximation, absolutely. Right? Yeah. So, yeah, just get over it. Like, in point of fact, most people in the world aren't thinking of you at all.
Yeah. Which
is why that's considered a branch of narcissism.
Yeah.
Like, to believe that people care enough about you to try to screw you over is really incredibly self-centered.
Yeah. Yes. It really, really is. But we exist in these little like meat packets that like there are branches of philosophy that ask the question, like, do we does anybody else actually exist? Like,
Well,
as an
no,
individual,
and
I
yes,
feel like I
our
think and
experience it with I can only interact with the constructs in my mind. I don't interact with you. I interact with the changes that that these electronics put waves in the air and light waves in my eyes, and that causes changes in the structure of my brain. And yes, that is all I will ever interact with.
yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't exist.
Right, but like it's a thing that we can't necessarily prove that other people don't exist, or other people do exist. Like,
Well, no, I can't prove either way. But even if you don't exist, if nobody else exists, and it's all a figment of my imagination persistently causes the things that I imagine as other people to react negatively when I react to them as if they don't exist.
right,
And that makes my life within this hallucination worse. So
right,
whether or not they actually exist, if I act as if they exist, my life, hallucination or not, is better.
right,
So I don't actually care. I
right.
actually
But
laid awake many nights in high school, like really worried about what if none of it exists. And
uh-huh,
then I'm like, you know what? What's it going to change?
right. It doesn't
You
change
might as well just
anything.
keep acting like it exists.
Yeah, it's like that quote from earlier. Like, regardless of whether and yes, your worldview changes based on whether people actually exist or whether they're figments of your imagination. But it doesn't really change how you act.
Right. So.
But no, I was talking about, like, because we live in a world where, like, the even the existence of other people around us is dubious at best.
Right.
Like, it's hard for us to make sure to keep in mind that there's, like, 7 billion other people who don't even have any idea who we are. Like, it's so much
Right.
easier to
Don't
view
care.
existence as around us because that's all we know and that's all we can really understand.
Yeah.
Giving allowance that we ever actually understand anything about ourselves.
Which,
Yeah. Let's see. Oh yeah, here's the the line from Mr. Bennett about that. I highlighted that whole paragraph.
Where he's like,
Yeah.
but whatever happens, at least your mother will complain about it.
Oh, no, this was the one that says, your sister is crossed in love, I find. I congratulate her. Next to being married, a girl likes to be crossed a little in love now and then. It is something to think of, and it gives her a sort of distinction among her companions. When is your turn to come? You'll hardly bear to be long outdone by Jane. Now is your time. There are officers in Meryton to disappoint all the young ladies in the country. Let Wickham be your man. He's a pleasant fellow and would jilt you credibly.
And then, like, the next line, and Jane and Elizabeth's like, oh, I can do with being jilted by somebody less attractive. We can't all be as lucky as Jane. And Mr. Bennet is like, but it is a comfort to think that whatever of that kind may befall you, you have an affectionate mother who will make the most of it.
Yes. Oh, man. Like, they're totally being sarcastic here.
And she just, like, he's a pleasant fellow and would jilt you creditably. And Elizabeth's like, thank you, but I would not look so high as to be screwed over by such an attractive man. We can't all be that lucky. She just like jumps right into it.
Yeah.
Let's see. I highlighted the happy, like, every Mr. Collins never talks about, like, their wedding day or, like, the day in which they'll get married or their nuptials. It is always the day that will make him the happiest of men.
Oh my gosh.
Like, he has this one phrase and that's all he knows.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's too simple to just say the day we get married. That, like, doesn't even do justice to the whole, like, how awesome marriage thing is. Like,
and it's awesome because his Lady Catherine herself advised him to marry.
Yes,
Therefore, it must
exactly.
be awesome.
Therefore, it will make him happy. By golly, it will make him the happiest of men. On that day,
So
that will
I
make him the happiest of men.
happiest of men. So I was talking to my coworker, and she said she had one of the first people she worked for was a guy running his own business, and it was fine. She was helping him out with whatever, but she gradually came to realize over like her 6-month internship that the guy had no opinions of his own. That like he liked things if everyone else liked them, and he didn't like things if everybody, like, she would be like, so I went and saw this movie and it was pretty good, and he'd be like, oh, have you read good reviews about it? And she's like, no, I just like it. Like, that's, I guess you have one good review because I liked it. But if it didn't have at least 4.5 stars on Yelp and like at least 17 reviews, then it wasn't worth anything. And that was how he lived his life.
Oh, wow. I mean,
And that's kind of, Mr. Collins is just like, well, Lady Catherine said, so
yeah,
obviously.
Like, there's a temptation to do that, I think. Like, it's one of the things that, like, because comedians, Adam Sandler, who's the guy from Anchorman? Will Ferrell.
Ron Burgundy. That's it.
Like Adam Sandler and Ron and Will Ferrell are both like they're pretty like polarizing comedians in terms of their films. Like,
yes,
people either love, like, for each one, people either love them or they hate them and can't stand them.
Yes.
And
I'm more in the latter camp, but
right, yeah. And it was very difficult for me for a while because like I just found them like amusing as everything. I'm just like, look, these are stupid movies, and I think they're hilarious.
Right, which is fine, right?
And so many people I respect are like, I can't stand this movie. It bugs me, like it drives me up the wall. And the reason it drives them up the wall is every single reason that I love it. And
right. And I'm very much like, that's the thing. I don't find it hilarious. Like, the humor just doesn't, for me. That's so, you know what? I don't watch it. I don't have to complain about it.
Right.
I just don't watch them.
Yeah, and that's like that's kind of the thing that I kind of realized around that was that like a movie doesn't, like, just because you enjoy it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good movie. Like, there are lots of really bad movies that are quite enjoyable. Like the Super Mario Brothers movie from like the early 90s is one of the worst movies ever made, I'm told. But like when I like it has nothing to do almost with like the actual like story of Super Mario Brothers, which I don't know how you'd make a movie about that anyway. But like when it came out, like they got like some really high name actors for the time, and like they spent a lot of money on this movie, and it was just really cheesy and like awful, and like it was just terrible. And it came out during a time in my life, and I had no idea about other people's opinions or anything, and I just really liked it. I was like, this movie is cool because I was like 7 or 12 or something.
And it was fantastic.
Right.
Whatever it was. We can look it up.
And like just a few years ago, I went back and I got it on DVD and I watched it again, and I was like, no, that was a bad movie, but I still enjoyed it. Like, it doesn't have to be
1993.
93, so I would have been 10 that year, so
I bet that's the perfect age to enjoy that movie.
Yeah, probably. And like I saw a video, I saw an interview with the guy who played Jar Jar Binks the other day. And he said that like kids nowadays who grew up with like the prequel trilogy being the first, like they don't understand like why people hate Jar Jar.
Right.
They're like, what? He was a character in the first 3 movies. Like, okay, so what? I don't understand why everyone's like, why do my parents and all of their friends hate Jar Jar so much? Like, yeah, he's dumb,
right.
but why do they hate him?
Right. Why is Jar Jar code for the worst possible thing that can ever happen to anyone?
Right. Yeah. So it's just one of those things. Like,
Because you don't understand how long we waited.
I
And then we
know.
got Jar Jar.
Right.
Anyway.
But yeah, so like that's sort of like what I was saying is like, you don't, just because something is, you can have an opinion that isn't the common consensus. Like, it's people are perfectly capable, I believe, if they apply themselves, of enjoying something and acknowledging that it is really poorly crafted.
Right. This is bad art. And I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's
well, the
like,
guy who writes Schlock Mercenary he does video reviews on his blog underneath the comic, and he went and watched Inside Out, and he said, he says, let me start this review by saying I think this is probably the most important movie that will be released this decade. That said, I rate movies based on how much I enjoyed myself at the theater, and on that metric, Inside Out does not cross my threshold of awesome. It's not to say it's a bad movie. It is an excellent movie. It is an amazing movie. It is good art, and it will change the world in terms of helping people understand and be able to regulate their emotions and figure out how to work with them. It is groundbreaking. I just didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And several other, like, I don't know, Die Hard or whatever came out this year that he's like, this was a terrible movie, and I loved it.
Yeah, like the Mad Max was an action movie, came out last year. It's literally like car chase scene after car chase scene after car chase scene, except that it's all in the desert in Australia, and they're all like these crazy, like, fantastical vehicles with like spikes and like,
yes, I have
like
seen
these homunculus cars, and it's just like these homunculus cars chasing after the group that Mad Max is with. Like, he's not even the main character of the movie, and like they literally they go out somewhere, and what they thought was going to be there wasn't there, and they go back.
Oh.
And it's just car chase out, and it's car chase back, and then they get back, and the movie ends, and that's all the movie is. Like, but it's like, so it's not like a great film, but it does have really good cinematography, and like I will acknowledge that the cinematography and the filming quality of it was great. The story was not really there, but it was what it set out to be, what it claims to be, and a lot of people are calling it like the best action movie in decades. And I totally enjoyed it.
I don't feel like action movies have a lot of competition. I don't feel like they're very good movies in general. So.
Right, yeah, it doesn't, to have, and it's, yeah, I don't know. I think the secret to making a good film is to know exactly what the film is trying to be and do everything you can do to make it that and nothing else.
Because that was the problem with the prequel. They were dramas that were trying to be action movies, or action movies that were trying to be dramas, but whatever they were not. And
maybe also kind of kid-friendly as well.
Yeah, no, like, just pick something and go with it.
Yeah. And that, I think, is one of the things that the new Star Wars movie did well, is it...
Yes.
It picked that it was going to be fan service for people who grew up watching Star Wars.
It said, I'm going to make a movie that people who love Star Wars will love.
Yeah.
And he did that.
They will recognize
partly because he knew what a Star Wars fan wanted to see.
Yeah.
Because he was one.
Right.
He's like, I'm just going to make the movie that I wish I had.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to send it to everyone.
Yeah. So that's, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, back to...
Let's see. Because, yeah, I need to finish up. I have at least one nerd in my house, other than me and my husband.
Oh, nice. Okay. Because I'm like, hang on, if you're in your house, that's at least
obviously one. Like, I can see that you're in your house, so I know you have a nerd in your house.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so I
Yeah. No, but I
highlighted
have at least one extra nerd.
right. I highlighted the conversation with Mrs. Gardner. She said that expression of violently in love is so hackneyed, so doubtful, so indefinite that it gives me very little idea. It is often applied to feelings which arise from a half hour's acquaintance as it is as often applied to feelings which arise from a half hour's acquaintance as to a real strong attachment. Which
And then I highlighted Elizabeth's response, that was basically like, well, yeah, but he was really rude. So that's how you know.
right,
Is
yeah.
not general incivility the very essence of love?
I know.
And that seemed
I
to me
don't
like one of those quotes that should be as famous as the "It is a truth universally recognized."
right. I need to
That
look
should
up.
be on T-shirts and just like across the headers of Tumblr blogs and whatever. Is not incivility the very essence of love?
Right? See it.
It should totally be a tagline. They should make another movie that's a rom-com that's Pride and Prejudice, because they all are.
Uh-huh.
And the tagline should be, is not general incivility the very essence of love?
Yeah.
By her argument, Darcy is violently in love.
Oh, with like a lot of people. Or
With like
himself.
everybody. Or something. Anyway, he is
Yeah.
definitely violently in love.
Definitely a
One way or
violent love
another.
going on there with him.
Can't argue.
Yeah. And then no, I thought that's amusing. Like I would argue that general incivility is evidence of love, perhaps. But I don't know that
Perhaps not the essence.
of. Yeah. What else? And that's I guess I didn't really highlight any much after that because they're just sort of like it's just sort of like details of like, oh, they're staying here and Mr. Wickham came by and like was part of the group that hung out with them and they stayed for a week. And
I mean, the last like the pre-antepenultimate paragraph where I counted where it's describing like there was not a day without its engagement. Mrs. Bennet is so carefully provided for the entertainment that they did not once sit down to a family dinner.
Mm-hmm.
It just sounded so exhausting to me.
Oh, I know. I'm just like,
right?
Yeah.
Going to visit that relative who's an extrovert and really like is so excited you're coming that they're going to make everything awesome for you, and their idea of awesome is non-stop visitors, and you're like,
yeah. Yeah. Oh
I'm
my
like
gosh.
I'm like anxious just thinking about it.
Yeah. And then you just get a few paragraphs about like Mrs. Gardner is trying to like figure out this Mr. Wickham guy and be like, hang on a second, and then she's going to talk about him in chapter 26, and I'm like, I want to read that,
which we're not.
Which we're not talking about.
Well,
so.
read faster.
Read more frequently.
Read more. Spend more time reading.
Yes, that's what I need to do. So
because I'm on chapter 31. So
if we had 5 chapters to discuss, you'd be up until like 3.
That is true. And your Saturday would be gone.
My Saturday would be gone and you'd be up until 3.
There are worse fates.
There are certainly worse fates than that, yeah. But okay,
Let me double check that I'm good for next week. I'm pretty sure I'm good. I sent you a Scandinavian the World comic.
Okay.
Related to Mad Max because it's awesome.
Nice.
Yep, I'm good for next week.
Cool.
So we'll do this again.
All right.
I'll try to remind you earlier.
Yeah.
So that you can read some stuff.
It's so I have so many things going on in my life. It's hard to remember to do any one thing. So I really appreciate the reminders.
So I'll just poke you. I'll just be that friend.
Just a reminder, reading Pride and Prejudice is a thing that you could potentially do today. I want to get like a whiteboard and like write down the current goals that I have. So when I'm sitting at my computer after work, my brain is like dead and doesn't want to think. And I'm like, what do I want to do with my time? I can look up and be like, oh, I could do that. That's right. That was one of my things.
Right. I have my whiteboard, and that's a thing that I generally do, except right now there's nothing on it. So
okay.
I was going to like show you. But there's no point in making you sick to your stomach with the crazy camera motion when there's not actually anything there.
Nice.
So
okay.
Cool. Well, I will say hi to all the nerds for you.
Yep, tell them I said hi. And
I'm
have
sure
fun.
they will say hi back, so I'll just preemptively say hi to you from the nerds.
Cool. All right.
And we'll discuss Star Wars without you.
Okay. Have fun doing that.
That's what you get for moving to Japan.
Right? Okay. See you later.
All right. See ya.